All right, I got this 2012 or so Ford Edge. And they've got kind of an odd complaint. It's like a vibration feeling at idle. You know, and I'm inspecting some things and the engine's not moving an excessive amount or anything. But I doubt it'll show on camera, but if I sit in here, I'm just sitting here, I almost feel like I'm sitting on the engine in a way. Like if you see my hand, it's just got a little bit of a harshness, a little bit of a vibration through the body. And so the theory is, if it's got a bad engine mount, you know, the engine mounts should keep the engine and transmission assembly kind of isolated in the rubber mount. If one of the mounts is bad, the engine could actually sag and contact the body, and that's really what it feels like. There's definitely no way to show that on camera, but I can just kind of describe it. It's not like the whole car shaking like a misfire. It's just got a bit of a roughness. Almost like if I were to have a glass of water here, it would be kind of like just rippling. And so it's a weird complaint, but I've been doing some diagnosis on it, and based on a previous diagnosis I did, I know I've got at least one bad engine mount. And so I'm going to pause and get some stuff apart and show you a good way to check some engine mounts. And this one's a little bit tricky because someone already put at least that one new mount here on the engine side and a lower mount below the vehicle, the dog bone, the torque mount. But they did not change this transmission mount here, which I'll pull the battery and everything out so you can see. It's kind of a funny diagnosis, but I'm going to try to walk you through because it's a noise, vibration, and harshness concern. Alright, quick update here. So you can see, pull off the air intake and the airbox lid, pull the lower airbox, disconnect the battery by disconnecting the negative first and the positive, pull the battery out, unbolt the battery tray. Not going to really do a step-by-step. A lot of that stuff's pretty simple. And then here's the cool thing. We got a good view of this mount here. And when I looked at that mount, it didn't really look that bad. You know, to be honest, the lighting's terrible, but there's really not a whole lot to see other than right there I could see some separation. So I basically took a floor jack. I set the floor jack up against the transmission pan. Now I'm just doing this to, you know, take a little bit of weight off. If you're going to really hold the whole transmission and engine, because they're bolted together, you should put a wood block there. So this was really just a diagnostic test. And check it out. It was always really solid, but now that the weight's off of it, if I go ahead and I bounce the body, check that out. There's a whole lot of movement. I'm going to try to get it just right here. Hard to really get the camera smooth, but basically this whole engine mount center part is completely separated from the outside. And so it didn't look like that until I got the weight off. So again, I'll give it a try here. A whole lot of movement. Now, if you didn't want to do that and you had a assistant friend or whatever, I bet that you could have not taken most of this apart and had them be in the vehicle and change between drive and reverse and see the whole engine rock a whole lot. But, you know, I'm here by myself, so I'm doing it like, you know, in a way that would work. And so for sure, that engine mount is wasted. Actually, it's really a transmission mount. So because I did a previous diag, I've already got my parts here. I've actually got the dog bone, the engine mounts in this box, and the transmission mount came from this box. So I don't normally want to give part numbers because, you know, your part number could be different vehicle to vehicle, but in this case it was this one. I had the dealer look it up by VIN, and so that's what I'd recommend. Here's what the mount looks like. So if you kind of like get a figure that it's going to be here, you can see there's these top bolts, but then there's also these bottom bolts from the side. So those side bolts are going to be a little more tricky. So I'm going to lift it. I'm going to pull this whole aluminum piece off, and I'm going to pull this center bolt and, you know, undo the nut on the backside, pull the center bolt out, and then with that whole aluminum piece out of the way, I'm quite sure I'll be able to get to these bolts that are way down in there. I took a little bit more weight off of the transmission, and so that should be a little bit more apparent. I really wanted to get a good shot of how much movement there is there. Of course, using my body weight to do it makes me move the camera a whole lot, but there's substantial separation. And so you can imagine this part here is going to lay down on the body and transfer a lot of that vibration that should be contained in the engine and transmission. So moving ahead. All right, so I just got the aluminum bracket part off. Kind of a quick tip. This nut on the backside you don't need to do anything with. It's got this little arm welded onto it. It's kind of like a speed nut, and so you don't need to hold that side. You just need to undo this side. And when that comes out, a few of these nuts here, you know, like typically like an 18 millimeter 15s, and then there's one 13. Then when that comes out of the way, and you know, you got to just move the harness a little bit, like pull this little Christmas tree out of the bracket for the shifter cable. When you get to this point, check this out. This sucker is wasted. I mean, just, it's so apparent now that the bracket's out of there. This thing's totally shot. Matter of fact, I can separate the whole mount right now. There you go. So that's what's left of this mount. Now when it's in the car, you can see it's much less apparent, and so, you know, my initial inspection, this was kind of a tricky problem. I didn't see much, but just knowing that the noise, vibration, and harshness coming from the engine concern would kind of lead you to want to inspect the powertrain mounts. And so once you get to this point, bingo, that's pretty apparent. And so now the next step will be these 13 millimeter bolts, and those 13 millimeter bolts, then this whole mount piece will be out, and then, you know, our new one can go in there. So we'll update soon. All right, so update. Those side bolts are quite challenging. So this little bracket I took off. I actually took my belt off because I'm leaning so hard on this fender. I didn't want to scratch it up. I mean, I was gonna whip it with my belt into shape, but seriously though, those side bolts, like where that ratchet's on, they have these bolts. I don't know why. Here's one of them. They have so much freaking Loctite on them that they're really hard to get out the whole entire way. So cracking them loose, not really a big deal, but it just, the entire way is fighting me. And so I was using my wrench and it kept kind of slipping off. So instead I've got my 1/4 inch ratchet. I don't have nearly enough strength to turn that 1/4 inch ratchet. They're that tight with the Loctite. So I got 1/4 inch ratchet, 1/2 inch drive socket and extension. Even way up here, I mean, just watch. That's how much it takes. I mean, it's a solid like 60-70 foot-pounds to turn it still, and I've got it like halfway out. The whole way is fighting the crap out of me. So these bolts are really time consuming, and just to get enough room, I took that bracket off. That bracket there went up to, you know, something near the battery, and so I got that bracket out just to get more room. But the top bolts suck too, but at least you can get a ratchet or an impact gun. Side bolts, you can't fit anything. So I got the transmission dropped down to get a little bit more room, but they suck. It's going to take some time. So we'll update. Quick update. Check that Burns-O-Matic little torch out with nap gas. I gotta move quick because I got it hot. But you know, I've never really been beat up bad by Loctite so much, but this thing was really kicking my butt. So I thought, hey, let me heat this bolt up, try to melt that Loctite. And now that I got the Loctite melted, boy, it's nice. And so, I don't know. I'm not sure that this thing is normal, but I have never struggled so bad with Loctite. I mean, I was partially starting to round the bolt off. I was just getting beat up, so maybe that'll be a good little trick for somebody. Get that thing hot with some MAP gas. Even maybe propane would work. But now that it's melted, this is doable. So That's all. I'll update you in a bit. I think I'm pretty close. I'm bottoming out against the transmission, so I'm going to jack it up a little more. So there's that last bolt. And try to get another shot of the little Burns-O-Matic. But man, it's just the amount of Loctite on the sucker made it really tough. You can see the Loctite's kind of shiny. Hard to get to focus, but it's melted. So I'm going to wire wheel all the Loctite off all these bolts and put new Loctite on. I normally don't deal with that because the bolts are accessible. And you can see, like, I was barely able to hang on to that bolt with the amount of how many times the wrench slipped off, because it was just took so much force. So not usually a struggle, but this time it was. The bolt's still a little bit warm, so definitely going to go through. I'm gonna wire brush. I'm gonna use a wire wheel like a bench grinder, but clean all that Loctite off there and put some new stuff on. Blue, I believe, is medium strength. So now we got access here, though. So that was a pain. If you do use the torch, just be careful not to get the harness or, you know, any rubber parts hot. All right, making good progress here. Something pretty cool I wanted to point out. So when all this is tight, and you drop this aluminum plate on, you got to be careful about the alignment, because if you figure you change the position of the mount, because these bolts do have a little bit of room, you could change the alignment of the axles and all kinds of stuff. So see, like right on this one, you can just barely see the shiny spot down on the actual aluminum. We want to make sure that we're going to line it up. But what they did for you that's really cool, this one bolt in the corner is tapered, and so that bolt is going to kind of make sure that this bracket is lined up. So go ahead and drop the bracket on, start the 3 nuts, and then I'm going to go ahead and buzz that 13 millimeter kind of weird special bolt down. I'm not going for torque right now. I just want to buzz it down and get it roughly into position. So give me 1 second. All right, so just you know, just gonna get it buzzed down a little bit here. And I noticed it did move the transmission a little bit, so now we know we should be fairly squared up here. And so I'm going to run the nuts down, and then I'm going to torque all of them, including the bolt, and I know it'll be well aligned. And then the last step will be to actually lift the transmission up a little bit and get that center bolt through. So tighten the bolts to the transmission case first, then the center bolt. Alright, so just to show you, I got my floor jack here. Now that I've got it tightened, I'm just stepping on the floor jack with my foot, and I'm just basically gonna slowly but surely lift it, and I'll get that bolt hole aligned, and then I'll push the bolt through and get it started. So that's kind of the process. You know, if it's fighting you, it's because you're doing it wrong, basically. So I should be close, but I can't really do it with one hand, so I'll check back with you. Alright, so now that I'm close, I'm just, you know, I got the bolt most of the way in, trying to line the hole up. I've got my pry bar down here. You can see I'm just kind of prying between the transmission case and the body, you know, just giving it, you know, a little bit of a wiggle. Now I can't do it with both hands, with one hand on the phone, but as I'm doing the wiggle on the pry bar, I'm just kind of feeding the bolt through. I'm not going to try to start threading the bolt and mess the threads up. I'm going to just kind of work the pry bar, which, you know, is helping to align it, and I'm going to keep on pushing on the bolt, and it's pretty much there. You can see it just takes 2 hands, but a little technique. The next logical mount would have been the upper one on the engine side, but because some of that stuff was pretty hot, I decided to jump underneath. So I got it lifted right there. I got, you know, obviously used jack stands at the pinch welds, and this is the transmission torque mount right here. You can see it, kind of a dog bone, sometimes they would call it. And so I'm going to change that one as well. Although this one is not showing a defect, it was an aftermarket one. And so just talking to a specific Ford tech that I know that sees these every day, they're kind of known, the aftermarket ones are kind of hard, and they tend to pass through some more noise, vibration, harshness. I did start it with the new transmission mount in, and it's, I would consider it acceptable, but this customer's very particular, and so I'm gonna put these other two Ford OEM mounts in. And so there's the dog bone mount. If I come over here, you can see, you know, basically I got to pull this little tin cover. There's a couple bolts up there. There's a through bolt here, a through bolt here. To get at it, you really need to drop the exhaust down. So these are like 15 millimeter studs. You know, the nuts on the studs are 15 millimeters. Pull it here, pull it up here, and then, you know, you could just hang it carefully out of the way. It'll hang, the Y pipe will hang down and kind of flex at the flex pipe. Just don't over flex it. And you know, because these gaskets are pretty healthy metal ones, I don't anticipate reusing be a problem. This one's a donut, and so that's kind of where I'm at. Not real technical job. It's just, you know, now I'm under the car, and so I'll check back in a bit. Looks like it's gonna be pretty easy. So that's it for this mount. Once the exhaust is down, quite easy. It's really only been, I don't know, 10 minutes or less. Just for reference, a couple bolts here are the 15s. The little heat shield bolts are 10s. This one in here was an 18, and this one here is a 15. And so all of them pretty easy. This one's nice and easy. When you go to lift the mount out and you get the bolts out, the mount actually has to be lifted upwards. You can't pull it through the bottom, but if you lift it upwards, it'll come right out. It's very easy mount. When you go to line the bolts up, just, you know, put your hand down here. This is the front side of the car. Put your hand down here, and just, you can kind of like lift the engine up and away. And so it's that's how you do it. It's really tough to get the video down here, but the alignment won't take a pry bar. Just take a little bit of your force pushing the engine back up that way. So nice and easy. Moving on to that upper engine mount, driver side. All right, so our next target is this one here, and I don't anticipate this one's gonna be very difficult. Looks like most of the bolts for it are vertical, so that means we're using the impact gun. Nice and quick. I got tools all over now, but I did want to show, there was that dog bone, and in the event you got the exact same vehicle, there's the Ford part number. And again, almost time for a cleanup and regroup here for me. Here's the engine mount, so that's the driver's side mount. Part number, here's what it looks like. And so I could tell that the aftermarket mount didn't come with this upper kind of weight. I've seen sometimes on the engine mounts they'll bolt a weight there, and that's to, you know, if they add a weight, it'll change the natural frequency of the material and to kind of like dampen a vibration. And so, you know, maybe this engine's not the most balanced, this 3.5 liters, maybe not the most balanced and smooth running, and so they've got some pretty extensive engine mount design. And so that's just kind of a reason to not go with the aftermarket. Honestly, the aftermarket weren't much cheaper, so there's really no reason. And so, you know, step one to deal with that, we're gonna have to be conscious that I may move this coolant surge tank. If I'm gonna move it, I'm hoping to not have to open up the system. If I do, keep in mind this may be pressurized. It's part of the reason I left this one for last, because I just drove this one home. This thing's pretty hot, and it seems like it's taking a while, but I'm moving pretty quick. So next thing, we do need to support the engine, and so again, use a rubber block or a block of wood, and just barely, you know, get it to touch the oil pan. Do not try to lift the vehicle by the oil pan. We're not lifting the vehicle, we're just trying to support the one side weight of the engine. So when we unbolt this mount, the engine's going to try to drop out of it, but no problem because the jack's supporting it. And so let me jump into this one and I'll update. I got that mount out. So you can see here's the aftermarket. You know, they did sell this part of the mount. It didn't come with the weight, and it didn't come with the bracket. And so here's the OEM. The OEM comes with everything, and you know, they look similar, but again, it's the specific rubber or the, you know, the actual mount part that's going to vary from aftermarket to OEM. The other cool thing was, I'm gonna hold this, I'm about to put it in. I was able to lift this surge tank way up and kind of snake it out of the way. Be careful, this metal line right here is the AC line, so if you overflex that, you'll lose your refrigerant and you'll have to buy a line and do the recharge. But it is something that you could sneak out. It's pretty easy. I mean, this is all the bolts that came out. It's really not that many. All of them were pretty straightforward. It'd be very helpful to have a long 1/2-inch extension. So that's a 6-inch and a 12-inch combined. So, you know, a nice 18-inch extension get me way up out of here in this workspace, so I could get those nuts off down there. And so pretty straightforward. I'm gonna kind of like snake the new one in here carefully and then follow up with you. Alright, so I've already verified it. I moved it over to the shade because I wanted to recheck some things. But man, it's nice and smooth. Come on, you want to help? You want to help? You want to get in stranger car? It's a good thing you don't shed. Yeah. And so check it out. Again, you really can't tell, but I mean, it is so smooth compared to how it was. Just don't feel it. Just really the way it should be. So 100% with those mounts, it's like on the money, on the money. So customer will be happy. Consider that the third C of repairing it, verifying the repair. This is the completion.